So, as a trauma informed clinician, people always ask me, why do I have to process this? What does that even mean? Then we start to talk about their life as a story. Some people are uncomfortable with the mention of trauma and that applying to their story. So I tell them identifying as a trauma informed clinician, and that is an approach I use with everybody that comes to therapy with me, not because everyone has trauma, but because everyone has things they just get through. But because everyone has those things they get through, and then the larger story of their life, there's like stories within the story. And it can get, kind of crowded in there like a logjam. And when we talk about processing some of these stories or reprocessing these stories, it's really, kind of just to walk around your life with less traffic inside. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about how experience gets held and how to process or reprocess and why that's important. So when we have a difficult experience or just any experience, the brain is wanting to maintain homeostasis, balance. It wants equal blood flow and electrical activity across your cortex. Kind of like a TV series. And one season in that TV series on Netflix. That rarely happens because there's constant activity. So it's more like Netflix itself is how our brains operate. But there is the average normal experience of the brain and how things get filed away. Like an organized Amazon warehouse. Normal items, the paper towels that are in high demand, are easily accessible and stored and located in a way that's convenient to the customer. So we can get a little complicated when there's third-party sellers and products that you need to get in China, and you can kind of see how different situations can kind of disorganize the brain more, although there's already a lot going on up there. So after a normal event in 4 to 24 hours, we want to, get some order there, or else, the all-famous word, we will have kind of unprocessed experiences in there, and like the traffic that I talked to you about. The issue with experience is all in the order. More order equals more safety. Then remembering it when needed is easy. Like Amazon, you find the most convenient warehouse based on customer location and the product needed, and you get the satisfied customer experience. Abnormal experiences, such as a threat, is when the homeostasis goes out of whack. An overwhelming experience, or an overwhelmed customer, is kind of like putting all sorts of products in their cart as if on pure adrenaline, and they're only shopping by image. The brain chemicals are determining what goes in the cart. So let's say we have Janice, and she is a waitress who comes into the outpatient burn clinic, and she's got burns to the backsides of her hands, and she was working covering for the cook with the fryer, and kind of didn't know what she was doing, and she pushed her hand into the hot oil along with the French fry fryer, and she has burns, like all over her knuckles, and remembers herself screaming and people thinking that she was joking, not taking her hand out of the hot oil because she was just kind of like frozen in horror. And while the burns were relatively small, the resulting trauma from this injury was significant. She has regular nightmares, flashbacks, and especially troubling panic attacks when thinking about returning to her job. Her brain has been hijacked by trauma. She feels out of control. She can't take her mind off what she wants it to do, which is to forget the trauma. But despite what reason says, her body holds on to the distress of the accident and is desperately trying to get out of the kitchen still. The hijacking results in, disorganization, or we sometimes call this post-traumatic stress disorder. Some common symptoms of PTSD include nightmares, flashbacks, panic attacks, startle response, and preoccupation with the traumatic event. But how exactly is her brain and body being hijacked by the trauma? Simply put, when a person experiences something traumatic, adrenaline and other neurochemicals rush to the brain and print like a picture there. The traumatic memory loops into the emotional side of the brain, totally cutting off from the part of the brain that conducts reasoning and cognitive processing. The reasonable part of the brain is unable to help the emotionally loaded part of the brain get away from the trauma. So understanding the brain and the body in trauma means understanding that several parts of the brain are important. They include the forebrain, the prefrontal cortex, the limbic system, which is located in the center of the brain, and the stem. When a person experiences a traumatic event, adrenaline rushes through the body and memory is imprinted into the amygdala. So this disorganized shopper who's only shopping on imagery, you're not going to understand their cart. You're not going to understand the story behind that because it's all brain chemical being activated, which is part of the limbic system. The amygdala holds the emotional significance of the event, including the intensity and the impulse of emotion. So only the amygdala really knows what has been going on. For example, if you're like on a roller coaster, your sensory information is fear, speed, stress, excitement, not life-threatening. The amygdala can read the emotional significance of the event as it's a fun ride and you'll be off in 3 minutes. The amygdala stores the visual images of the trauma as sensory fragments, which means the trauma memory is not stored like a story, rather by how our 5 senses were experiencing the trauma at the time it was occurring. In other posts, I can talk to you about 3 other senses that we do have that we can start to access. But for now, the memories are stored through fragments of visual images, smells, sounds, tastes, or touch. Consequently, after trauma, the brain can easily be triggered by any sensory input. Reading normal circumstances is dangerous. So, for example, like a red light is no longer a red light. Now it's a possible spark. A barbecue had been just a barbecue, and now it sounds like an explosion. The sensory fragments are misinterpreted, and the brain loses the ability to discriminate between what's threatening and what's normal. The front part of our brain, known as the prefrontal cortex, is the rational part. That's what we're talking about when we talk about processing. Trying to re-engage that prefrontal cortex well after sometimes the trauma has completed. We do this in various ways in therapy, and we can get into those in additional posts. But for right now, I encourage you to give me any feedback about if this helped you understand a little bit more what's going on and the need for processing.